Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
Felix Ofosu kwache akasa na wa dismantle NPP Jandam. Na omoka say government has spent $10 billion to stable the economy, which is temporary. Na Ghana, and I said Anka the president could have invested $10 billion into something prudential, which would have benefited Ghana. And Felix Ofosu kwache granted an interview with TV3 hot issues. Now what dismantle Jandam no. Ya me pesa obekama na yakotie nsem na enkyere mu otoa nsem so no okasa efa ora ene afen so no the prosecution against wana wodi bone in the previous administration, how it is going and what they intend to achieve in the fight against corruption. Now osan kasa efa the constitutional review committee no the 24-hour economy ene afen so no other NDC initiatives omobaya omose ombe implemented na amagana abaye krabehwe ensem we ni ensem ahodo bi na ode to dwa me pese obekama na yakoti ensem na enchemu. Subscribe to the channel, bell notification na share ma afoforo ensa enkabi comment section ho na we dey wadwenche aba yenti Felix Ofosu kwache.
Look at the year over. How do you think you fared as a government?
Well, I think that we've acquitted ourselves quite well. And it is fairly easy to measure this sort of performance. You just need to look at where the country was barely a year ago and where we are today. And I think that any objective analyst, any objective observer would agree that the country is in a much better position than it was when we took over power. There are many things that you could look at. Look at the economy, for instance. And the economy is important because that was the single most important item for the Ghanaian voter when they went to the polls barely a year ago. All the things that you use to measure the performance of an economy are pointing in the right direction. Today, the biggest problem that people had, which was an ever-rising cost of living, has been significantly mitigated. There's evidence of reduction in the cost of living through the reduction in prices. The depreciation of the currency, which was a perennial problem and was one of the things that used to worry our economy the most, has been brought under control, such that for the first time in as many years that I can remember,
right,
the city is going to appreciate, is going to record an annual appreciation of close to 30%. And if you consider the fact that barely a year ago, the city had lost about 27% of its value, you find that we've made significant progress in that regard. And this has led to a lowering of prices across many sectors. Look at the energy sector, for instance. Right. Today, fuel is selling much cheaper than it was when we took over. Indeed, if you compare the situation to exactly a year ago, you find that the price of fuel has come down substantially. It has translated into lower transport fares than before. Inflation is at 6.3%. There's every indication that it may even come down further. Interest rates, when we came in, interest rates were hovering around 30%. Today is between 15 and 18%. So look at our deficit, for instance. It has narrowed significantly. What they call the primary balance, which essentially is the difference between your revenue and expenditure if you set aside debt servicing or interest payments. The finance minister announced 1.6% surplus. So for the first time in a long while, we've gone beyond the targets that we set for ourselves. So if you put all of these together, there's real tangible improvement that one can point to. And that, for me, is gratifying to note.
At the same time, what explanation would you give to a section of the public who would say that, well, the indicators are good, but I don't feel it? But I'm not seeing it at my personal economic level.
It will be difficult for anybody to sustain such an argument. I mean, if a few months ago you were paying transport fares at a certain price, and today it is lower than that, you cannot say that you don't feel it. When you go to the pump, the price at which you bought fuel, when we took over, I think it was around 14 cedis a gallon, a litre, if I'm not mistaken. Today, there are some stations that sell it under 11 cedis a litre.
But the fares haven't gone down.
Yes, but the fares went down. They went down by 15%, I think sometime in the middle of this year or so, when they did the review. It has gone down. We know that there are some drivers who have tried to engage in rent-seeking behavior, but that is outside of the norm. The normal situation is that fares have gone down by 15%. The transport companies themselves announced it. The fuel pricing is real. We need to go to the pump today. There are companies oil marketing companies that are selling a liter of fuel for under 11 cedis, when it was around 14 cedis around this same time last year. So it is not deniable. You cannot say that you've not felt it when the evidence is pointing. I buy fuel, you buy fuel. So you know that what I'm saying is not an untruth. So whereas an argument can be made that perhaps vendors and sellers should reduce their prices further, that would be a legitimate demand. But to say that it has not been felt will not be exactly accurate. And I think that we need to be fair to these facts.
Another area someone would point to will be the price of food.
Yes.
And you know, things around that. While we see a decrease in the inflation for that, it is not as sharp as the rest of the indicators for inflation. Why?
No, but again, you need to look at the figures. There was a point under the NPP, I think 2023, I think sometime last year or so, when food inflation was around 61%. Today is around 9% or so. Yeah, so there has been a substantial reduction, and it is clear. And you see, there's data that shows, if you speak to Guta, they will tell you, indeed, we challenge them in Parliament. The Parliament's Committee on the Economy and the Finance Committee summoned Guta to a meeting, and they put it to them that there have been complaints about non-reduction in prices. Guta was able to show that the prices of up to 4,500 different items had been reduced. So whereas people may have legitimate reason to challenge the reason why some vendors and some traders have not reduced their items to the level that it should go to, there is no doubt that there have been reductions in prices. And we all live in this country, we all buy the same commodities. So I think that more can be done to lower the prices further.
So we can get to the point where food prices are better?
Yeah, we should get to a place where food prices are better. Of course, it will take a bit more than just the fall of inflation or the appreciation of the cedi. There must be some investment in agriculture to make food available. Now, once that happens, natural competition will drive down the price of food. So you find that in the budget, allocation has been made for a farmer services center, where up to 4,400 different farm implements will be brought in and distributed to 50 farmer services center, who will then help our farmers in these places with preparing their land, selling their land, and essentially engaging the activity that will ensure that there's an abundance of food. Take the poultry sector, for instance. Currently, there is a strategy document which has an objective of achieving self-sufficiency in poultry production in the next few years. Currently, Ghana is at 12% in terms of self-sufficiency in poultry. The objective is to ensure that by the close of this year, it is taken to 28%. Then in 2026, 2027, it goes above 60%. And then in about 3 or 4 years, it goes to 104%. That is the objective. Now, there have been policies rolled out, like the Ehukon Kitinkiti program. And in the last few weeks or so, about 3 million beds have been distributed across the country.
Already?
Absolutely. And the Minister of Agriculture has been spearheading this. A couple of weeks ago, the President commissioned a meat processing and poultry processing factory in Bechim as a way of providing a place where that company can offtake from poultry farmers. And the intention is to open additional meat processing centers across the country so that we have the whole value chain of poultry catered to. Now, all of this is being done to ensure that there's all year round cultivation of food, so that we do not have this lean and bumper seasons, which then tends to fluctuate the price of food. But overall, I think that compared to where we were last year, food has come down in terms of prices. Even the figures alone show, if at a point you are at 61% food inflation, and now you are around 9 or 10%, you see that clearly that's an improvement. But of course, I'll be the first to consider that more needs to be done going forward to get to the level where it becomes permanent and that food does not become one of the problems of the people of Ghana.
Let's look at the cedi performance. Everyone is happy about the stability. At last check, we have learned that over the period, government has spent some $10 billion in trying to shore up the cedi's value. Critics have said that $10 billion could have been put to more prudent use instead of what could be described as a temporary performance of the city. How do you respond to that?
Anybody who holds himself out as a critic must be informed about the subject that they are purporting to criticize government on. Those who argue that way appear not to understand what they are talking about. You see, government has not spent $10 billion showing up the city. That $10 billion is not government revenue in the same way as you have the revenue that accrues from taxes imposed on you and myself and other forms of revenue or non-tax revenue. It's not the same as going to sell oil and getting revenue, or going to sell cocoa and getting revenue, or going to sell some other commodity and getting revenue. Or when you pay VAT, the money goes into the national account. That is not it. You see, the Bank of Ghana has a duty to make Forex available to the market. So in the past, we relied on traditional sources of Forex. So normally we export commodities, and when it comes, the Bank of Ghana gets some of it. We export oil, for instance. So the share that needs to come to the country goes to the Bank of Ghana's reserves. And then sometimes through foreign remittances, we get substantial foreign exchange. When it is time for the cocoa syndicated loan, roughly about between $1.8 to $2 billion comes in, and then they put it in there. Over the years, that proved insufficient to meet the rising demand for Forex. So a new avenue had to be explored in order to get sufficient Forex, first for our reserves, and then to meet the day-to-day demand for Forex. So what has happened? In 2020, we put this in our manifesto, that in the same vein that there was one body that had authority to regulate the cocoa sector and market cocoa on behalf of all cocoa farmers, we were going to set up the gold board with similar functions. We had noticed that substantial quantities of gold was spirited out of this country that nobody could account for, and that the Forex accruing did not come into this country, or even if it did, it went into areas that one could not trace or account for. So there was a need to mobilize that resource and put it to a use that benefits the country. So what happens? The gold board simply mops up gold. They need money to buy the gold, which they buy in cities. Now, there are players in the economy who also need Forex, who regularly go to the Bank of Ghana to buy, because Forex essentially, or if you like foreign currency, is like any other commodity. It's like the shoe you are wearing.
Right.
To get it, you need to pay for its value. So because we do not spend foreign exchange here, it comes from somewhere. So you need to exchange. So you give cedis and you get Forex. The Bank of Ghana usually didn't have enough of it. And so there was scarcity, which then drove up the rates. That is how come at a point we were paying 17 cedis to $1, because there was simply shortage. So what has happened is that the Bank of Ghana takes cedis from those within the economy, the commercial banks and others who need the Forex. They give it to the gold board. Gold board then buys the gold and exports it. When the Forex comes, they give it to the Bank of Ghana. So they put some in their reserves, and then they engage in what we call intermediation. They give back the same value in Forex as they took in cedis. That is what happens. So they call it intermediation. So it's not like government has money sitting in the central bank, which it simply decides to offload onto the market for free. The Bank of Ghana sells the Forex and gets cedis. Now, it's also instructive to know that ordinarily, the concern would be that if the Bank of Ghana was doing that, then they will be burning their reserves. In other words, the reserves that they need to set aside to provide us with import cover, so that we're able to service our debt when the time falls due, those that are dollar denominated or denominated in foreign currencies would be in short supply. So that would have been the concern of these critics if indeed they had followed closely what the Bank of Ghana was doing. But the Bank of Ghana has more than adequate reserves, because when we came to power, we had reserves of just around $8 billion. Today, the Bank of Ghana has close to $13 billion in reserves. Right. Indeed, the IMF program required us to increase our reserves by $1.4 billion. The Bank of Ghana has exceeded it. So we've met the requirement and still have dollars because of the gold board agreement. So there's liquidity. At the same time, there are players in the market who require this foreign exchange to engage in business. So the Bank of Ghana simply intermediates, takes cedis and gives them dollars without burning the reserves and taking it to a level where it puts us in crisis. Right. So those who say they are critics and are criticizing, must understand exactly what is happening. If they tell you, and I've heard some of your colleagues in the media, and some persons aligned to the New Patriotic Party, deliberately attempt to mislead Ghanaians as though the Bank of Ghana was just dipping its hands in its reserves and giving it to the market. That is not what is happening. No, we have just found an ingenious way to bring in a constant stream of forex to meet day-to-day demand, which we didn't used to have the capacity to do in the recent past. That is the difference.
So, but, you know, the bottom line is that the central bank is still pumping in a lot of money, a lot of dollars.
Because there's a...
But the price should be driven by demand and supply.
Good. So, in order for the price to be low, supply must meet demand. The reason why the currency depreciated, it plummeted and collapsed under the NPP, was that there was a shortage in supply. They simply didn't have enough dollars to supply the market. This time round, we have created the mechanism of the gold board to ensure that supply keeps up with demand. The difference between us and them is that we were ingenious and innovative enough to set up a system that ensures a constant stream of supply of forex, in addition to the traditional sources that I've highlighted earlier. In the past, they simply relied on the traditional means, what do you call it, foreign remittances and proceeds of the sale of commodities. But this time around, we've brought something in that mops up every amount of gold, or the overwhelming majority of gold that is produced in this country for export, so that we get the forex to make us liquid. That is what has caused the city to be. So it is the result of deliberate government policy to do that. Now let me clarify that if anybody tells you that the same amount of money could have been used, for instance, to finance big push or to set up industries, the person simply does not know what they are talking about, because that is not what it is. It is not like we're going to take revenue belonging to government to go and give to players in the market for free. That is not what it is.
So sustainability then will also be a question that will arise, whether or not this combination method which you're doing is sustainable, or whether or not we are oversupplying so that the numbers will look good.
No, I mean, you see, the ideal situation would be that we will be an export-oriented country, so that through exports of various commodities, whether raw materials or processed materials or value-added materials, we get foreign exchange. We are not there yet. It will take a bit of time to get there. In between the time that we are in now and then, demand for forex will remain, and it will continue to increase. If we don't find a way of meeting that demand, our currency will continue to plummet. So rather than sit down and do nothing and rely on traditional sources of foreign exchange and always have supply lagging behind demand, we have gone on to do the gold board arrangement to ensure that we have adequate supply without affecting our reserve position. And I've already told you that from a position of $8 billion, we are now getting close to $13 billion in reserves. We have met the criteria, the conditionality set for us by the IMF, of increasing our reserves by $1.4 billion and exceeded it. Because of the gold board arrangement, we constantly have a supply of forex, which we then give to the market through intermediation that the Bank of Ghana does and takes cedis in return. So they get the same value of money that they put onto the market. So it is important that we stress that the claims being made by the NPP and the analysts we refer to are misleading and don't represent the actual situation.
I want us to look at that.
And in any event, you see, before the election, what was the biggest problem we had? The cost of living. Because we are largely import dependent, and it is a situation that must change over time. We were constantly under the pressure of our currency depreciating. And once that happens, the cost of living went high. We woke up one day and inflation was 54%. I recall very well that sometime between July and November 2022, the cedi rose from 6 cedis to 17 cedis. It was a catastrophic situation for businesses. Businesses collapsed because of that. The cost of living went so high. So that, for instance, if you needed to make a payment of the equivalent of $3,000 a month, in July, you needed 18,000 cedis to do that. By November that year, it had jumped to 54,000 cedis. This would impose hardship on any group of people. So no government can sit aloof and allow its citizens suffer such excruciating hardships because of rampant currency depreciation, when they can put in an arrangement to ensure that without endangering the reserves, we are meeting that demand. Because by making forex available, we are stopping a situation where our economy nosedives and deteriorates to the point where fuel is sold at 23 cedis a litre. At a point, fuel was selling at 23 cedis a litre at the pump. I mean, how are you ever going to be able to afford 23 cedis a litre of fuel? And what will be the impact on that? That is how come things became so expensive that people, look, there was a time in 2023 where the Ghana Statistical Service showed that because of the hardships that were rampant at the time, up to 8.5 million Ghanaians, which is nearly a quarter of our population, went without food for a day. So no government can sit aloof and allow this sort of thing to happen when you can find ingenious with that. The most important thing, and the reason why I keep on stressing that, is that by doing so, they have not endangered our reserve position. And once that happens, it means that it is a sustainable arrangement to ensure that we are able to keep up with demand. But of course, in between that period, there's a need for us to work so that we ramp up our export base, so that also then becomes an additional source of forex to meet the demand that we come up with every now and then. Yes.
Are we ever going to get to the point where the announced value of the city is what we get during forex when we go to the forex bureaus to look for foreign currency? Again,
that is of course part of it may arise from rent-seeking behavior, but mind you, our laws allow for the operation of forex bureaus, foreign exchange bureaus, in addition to the commercial banks. Because of the way our economy works, it's not everybody who is banked. You cannot just walk into a bank and buy forex. You need to retain an account with them, and you have to do that by exchanging the value in cedis that you hold in your account for that amount of foreign exchange. Even then, you have to go through very rigorous processes. So you have to show that you are going to import something, or you are traveling, or you are engaging in any other activity which the law permits you to have ways to do.
I mean, is that not problematic that we never get the true value?
So I'm explaining why there's that difference. So there's also the forex bureaus who operate outside of the banking system. They also have to get the forex from somewhere. Sometimes they get it from the commercial bank. So the banks sell it to them at a certain rate. So they have to put up a marker on it in order to make profit from the business. So that is what accounts for the difference. But to the extent that there's sufficient supply in the system, even their rates, even if it is slightly higher than what you get at the interbank level, will not be beyond the level which will make Ghanaians comfortable. So for as long as forex bureaus remain, you are going to have this sort of difference. Essentially, as I said, it's a commodity just like the shoe you are wearing. So if you bought this shoe from the manufacturer directly, you will buy it at a cheaper rate than if you went to buy it from a retailer. What does the retailer do? The retailer simply puts a marker on it so that they make profit from the business they are doing.
Maybe then it should be better regulated.
I agree that greater regulation, which the Bank of Ghana continues to do, and more rigorous enforcement of the law will perhaps stop this rent-seeking behavior. Some also engage in arbitrage, But the point that needs to be stressed is that currently the rates are lower, much lower, I must add, from what we inherited. And the simple reason is that there's sufficient dollars or foreign currency on the market. And that is the only difference. So for as long as you have more,
I see the point you're making, but the proof of the pie will be in the...
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is verifiable.
Indeed. I mean, we see the numbers.
So the interbank rate now is like 11.47, 11.50. That is simply an aggregation of the rates of the banks to determine the average. So what the Bank of Ghana puts is the average rate. That's what they call the interbank rate. You understand me? So that's the official rate. But there are other players who also offtake from those in the banks. They put on a marker.
I completely understand that.
So that's what it is. But the point is that the economy is such that room has to be made for people who operate outside of the formal system too. Until we get to a place where we are so fully formalized, where everybody is operating to the bank, you are going to have this agreement. But that takes a bit of time to happen. But the substantive point is that the rates now, even if you got it from the Forex Bureau,
it's better than
it's
before.
Much better than even the interbank rates under the NPP.
Let's look at the 24-hour economy. You launched the flagship policy year program, but the legal framework hasn't been passed yet.
Yeah, I think that substantial work has been done. The 24-hour economy secretariat has briefed Parliament once on the work that they've done. The legislative framework has been considered by Cabinet. I must indicate. And I'm sure that as and when it is ready to be laid before Parliament, it will come, we'll scrutinize it, and then it will pass into law. But more importantly, the Secretariat has been set up. The budget allocates in excess of 100 million cedis or so to them.
But we rolled out the program before the legal framework?
Oh, no, but the legal framework only defines the scope of the program, and then also clearly defines the contours within which we are operating. But before then, work has to be done, and somebody has to do it. So that is how come there was a presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy and accelerated export development program, who had a secretariat under his purview, which then worked to put in place the legislative framework, and then all the other things that must come into play in order that the policy takes off. So that work has been done, and we expect that in 2026 it will swing into full gear, so that the objective behind it is then realized.
And 110 million cedis has been allocated to the office.
Yes.
What are we expecting that to do?
But of course, that is what they need to. You see, it's not like government has said that we will put in $4 billion to roll out a 24-hour economy. The 24-hour economy program is essentially a private sector-led activity. So government has to play a coordinating role and ensure that we put in place the systems, the framework, and the environment within which that happens. So for instance, we're speaking about giving incentives to private sector players. You need a framework within which that happens. So the secretariat that works with other stakeholders within the economy to ensure that must have a budget, a basis within which they operate to get this right. So that 110 is supposed to allow them set up fully and acquire the necessary capacity to be able to do. Once they do that, they will then plug in the activities with other players, both public and private, in order to be able to roll out the full scope of activities captured under the 24-hour economy. So it's important that activity takes off, and that is what the 110 million Ghana cedis is supposed to do.
If you were to list any achievement for the program this year, what would it be?
But I think that a program has to be well thought out. It's unlike the NPP that believe in ad hoc sloganeering. We believe in more substantive undertakings. So the secretariat first has to be established properly with the right manpower in place. And then they establish the ground rules. They define clearly what they are going to do, which areas they are going to tackle. Indeed, when the 24-hour economy program was launched by the president several months back, I think that the framework was clearly laid out and set out. That has been done. What is left with now is plugging in with the various actors, both private and public, to ensure that this is rolled out. And a long list of things have been done in order to ensure that this comes to fruition. And I'm sure that in the new year, you will hear more about this, and then everybody who is interested in partaking in this will have the basis to do so.
How soon is the government hoping, looking ahead, how soon is the government hoping that the legal framework will be passed?
Oh, as quickly as Parliament can consider it. Yes, as quickly as Parliament can consider it. It should not be a problem at all.
Very well. The President is happy about the progress that has been made in light of that. But one of the things he said during the receipt of that report was that it should be released to the public. Why is that important to the government?
Well, I think transparency is important. What was set up was not a commission. Had it been a commission, the government would be required to put up a white paper through which it will state its position on the matter. So being a committee, there's really no, if you like, defined method through which you know what government thinks of the report and the recommendations therein. So the president thought that the first step was to publish the report fully, because this, after all, is a process to improve upon the constitution that serves the people of Ghana. So the people who it is intended to serve must understand what has happened, and they must know exactly what the committee proposed and the kind of work that has gone into it. So that's how come the president asked that we publish it immediately. It was received on Tuesday. And the object is that people will get to read it, understand what the issues are, and then be able to engage in informed debate around it, through which we achieve consensus on the issue. The president has indicated that right after the Christmas holidays and New Year festivities, an implementation committee will be set up. That is, after government has published its views on the report and the recommendations there, so that then it will stoke further public debate. We will refine the ideas that pop up. And then an implementation committee will be set up to implement the recommendations and get all the various stakeholders involved towards achieving the amendments that we all agree are necessary to improve upon our constitution and the democratic experiment that we've been having over the last 3 decades or so.
So we don't expect this to go to Parliament for
it will have to go
debate
to
at
Parliament.
all? Okay.
The rules are clear. It has to go to Parliament.
Right.
And those amendments have to be accepted or approved by Parliament. I think it's 2/3 majority or something. Before those ones that are entrenched need to go through a referendum. So the process is quite elaborate, but it starts with government stating the position and then getting the implementation committee to work on achieving first parliamentary approval and then public approval through referenda where necessary.
I see. I take it as the government is impressed by the work of the committee so far.
The chairman took us to some of the highlights of the key recommendations in there. And I think that by and large we agree. Many people in Ghana agree with many of the things. I noticed that the bit about the extension of the tenure of a president from 4 to 5 years has stoked a bit of debate, which is healthy. I'm sure through that process we will agree on some consensus. I have my own position on the matter. I'm sure you also have your own position. It is fine. So let us debate it. Let us agree or disagree on various aspects, and then come to some middle ground on what has to be done. But by and large, I think that the recommendations have been accepted.
I mean, is there anything in there that the government does not accept?
Oh, I think that it is premature. It will be premature at this stage to say that when government states its position, as the president has directed, I think that you will know exactly what we make of the report. But I think that the consensus generally out there is that this is a good work, is a good bit of work, and that it has to be followed through in order to achieve the sort of modification, refinement that we want to see in our constitution.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.